I had been this person, I had been this important senior person with a suit and respect and a team and this and that and that and that. And then all of a sudden I'm in the back of the truck with the backpack, and I haven't shaved, and I just look like anybody else. And of course I was anybody else, because we were all everybody else. So there was this real cutting down of taking you back to the real basics and really stripping away all of these layers that we build, and really stripping you back to your naked core.
Welcome back to Leadershipedelics. Today we meet with Nigel Pedlingham, a unique blend of changemaker, conscious guide, and psychedelic facilitator. Beyond his roles as a social justice leader, husband, and father, Nigel is the founder of MAGUEY, an Amsterdam-based practice dedicated to healing and personal growth. He also serves as the chair of the Guild of Guides in the Netherlands. An ardent lover of nature, ceremony, stillness, and the unknown, Nigel humorously yet humbly dubs himself a mystic in the making. A subject we'll delve into further in this episode for sure. Our discussion spans Nigel's transformative journey from corporate life to burnout and then to finding healing in Latin America. We'll examine his metamorphosis through reconnecting with his authentic self and his commitment to assisting others towards a more integrated life. We'll delve into topics like breathwork, preparation, integration, inherent wisdom, and the humbling experience of witnessing people's personal transformations. Join us for this insightful conversation and see you on the other side. Nigel, welcome to Leadershipedelics. It's really good to have you here today. You're joining us from Amsterdam, and it's a little bit late for you, right? Or what time is it?
It's about 7:30 in the evening.
7:30. Good.
The days are longer, so it still feels relatively early. Thank you.
Yeah. Does Amsterdam get to like full sunlight in like around June, or is it like a little more south than maybe the Norway?
Yeah, Norway is going to be later still in the evening, but still it's light till about 10 in the middle of summer. So it's nice enough.
How's your day going? Like what are some of the things you did today?
Yeah, what did I do today? I had quite a few discovery calls with possible clients who want to do the work. Also some study. Now you're putting me on the spot to actually think what I did today.
Your daily rituals.
Yes, exactly. And of course, my daily rituals, my morning meditations, my integration. And actually, that's been a big focus at the moment. A huge amount of personal integration work, as I've just come back from a few weeks of my own retreat. So that's quite a focus at the moment for me, landing and doing my own work.
Yeah. So let's before we dive in that, I mean, you've got a lot of things going on, a lot of projects. I was looking at your background, and so you're currently the founder of MAGUEY, which I can't wait to get to the name later, which is a healing practice based in Amsterdam. You're also the chair of the Guild of Guides.
Correct. Yeah.
No, it's funny because I wrote the Guide of Guides, but it's the Guild of Guides in the Netherlands, and there's so much, and I love how you put it. You're a mystic in the making. What does that mean? A mystic in the making?
Yeah, I knew you would jump straight on that one.
Well, every time somebody put bait in front of me, it's like I can't resist.
I kind of walked into that one, didn't I? It's funny. It's something that really came to me when I was in ceremony a couple of weeks ago, and I was having this whole kind of download on what I'm doing and where I'm going, and this whole message about owning the wisdom and the knowledge that I have, and the time to step into this and really own it. And this term just came into my mind, mystic in the making. And for me, mysticism is a very important part of my life. I feel like I've been on a a mystic and mysterious path since being a young child. And
Yeah.
as I grow older, I'm starting to understand that more and connect with that more and join the dots from this little boy to this graying haired man that I am now. And it's obviously said with a touch of humor and a huge dose of humility. But one can't, I don't think, sit there and say, yeah, I'm a mystic. That would seem incredibly arrogant and self-titled. But there is this mystical element and this natural affinity with the mystic path. So the term mystic in the making seemed to summarize that, and also in that sense that one never arrives. It's this thing that we never arrive. We're constantly on the path. We're constantly progressing. So I will be in the making until the next round.
I love it. You read my mind. That was my follow-up question. Is the mystic ever done being made? But that's it. That's and to your credit, every time you said the mystic in the making, whether in the form or a chat, there was a happy face next to it. So I definitely caught the humor in there, and I appreciated that, and keeping it real. That there's no end point there. It's the journey of the mystic in the making. Now you just got back from Colombia, from journeying in Colombia, and I'd love it if before we go to your personal journey, since this is so fresh, we touch a little bit on that, and why you went there. Maybe some of the highlights. And I know you're still integrating it, and sometimes talking about something so fresh while you're integrating it is hard, but I know there's a few elements that maybe we can highlight.
Sure. So I've just come back from 2 weeks in the jungles of South Colombia, staying with, for the second time, let's call them a medicine family. It's a very local and very small center in the southern part of Colombia, which generally I wouldn't class as being a retreat center. It's more a community healing center that accepts now and then people from other lands, those that find it. Why did I go? That's a really good question, because I was debating and wondering that until the moment I got there. It was a very interesting process this time. I think I just said it's the second time that I was there. I've done this work all over the place, but this was quite a special place, and not one I knew that I would return to after I left the first time. But something started happening about 6 months ago, where there was this kind of call to go back, not for a particular purpose at that point, but just a call. So we sat with that for a bit, and I spoke with the people that I'd gone with before, and all of us kind of came up to the conclusion that it was time to go back.
Yeah.
But still, there was a huge amount of resistance in me in going back. On the bus, on the truck on the way there was this huge amount of resistance going there. What are you doing? Why are you going? This was in overdrive. For the listeners, I'm pointing to my head.
That's why people should watch.
And I didn't have an answer, but what I did have was this which was naturally pulling me there, as I'm pointing to my heart. So, or my, this kind of intuitive part of me that was somehow drawing me back to this place and back to this work. So it was again having just to surrender into that and letting it happen. And then so began the battle.
I love how you're talking about the calling. It's a recurring theme A lot of people who haven't experienced a calling, it's really hard to explain it. Like if, and you're touching on that, but I want to go a little deeper. Like if you're trying to explain what a calling is to somebody who's never had a calling, what imagery, like how would you go about it?
It could be considered a gentle or loud voice that's coming from within. It
Yeah.
could be considered an itch that needs to be scratched. Uh, it's more just, and for this, it was a very felt sense. And
Yeah.
if you can imagine just this felt sense of this just has to be done, and trying not necessarily to question the why behind that and search for some rationalistic answer
Yeah.
to that. So it's just kind of connecting on that subtle level with an awareness which is within us, and that doesn't have to be related to to this kind of work or doing something as maybe some people consider extreme as doing this. This
Yeah.
is that calling that we have within us regarding everything. Do I want to live in this house? Is this the right job for me to do? You know it,
Yeah.
but can you hear it?
Yeah. Do you feel there's an element of faith and surrender that comes with following a calling? Like I feel like
Yeah.
you're touching on that a little bit.
No, absolutely. And that's where I was starting to touch on. There was this battle between the thinking mind and the faith that's needed to connect with intuitive guidance. Is that the intuitive guidance is there just making you step into it, but this thing holds on and is quite powerful in like sabotaging that or questioning that, and
Yeah.
you have to navigate between those two poles of existence to find where you end up.
It's beautiful. So that calling, that latest calling, I'm assuming you had other callings, and we'll touch on that on your journey, but this latest calling brought you to Colombia in that bus as you were heading to the not the retreat center, but the community.
Yeah. Yeah.
What medicine I mean, what tradition and medicine did you work with there?
Yeah, this particular couple of weeks was working with Yahe, as it's known there, ayahuasca,
Yeah.
with the addition of Cambo.
Mm.
And also I add into that mix all of the other elements that are very much present around it. So those obviously are the principal medicines used in ceremony, but the addition of nature, the addition of community, the addition of stillness and silence, the addition of a river to sit in, plants, baths with plants, and so forth. It's way more, it's this kind of whole holistic package, should we say, that creates the wonder that eventually happens after a couple of weeks of doing that. And you do as much in the days that you have off just hanging in a hammock as you do sometimes sitting with the medicine.
Well, nature itself, especially the jungle, is so strong. They're so connecting.
Yeah. But it's also this fact of being in the same place for 2 weeks. We don't leave the compound where we're at. There's no external stimuli. There's no television. There was there was internet. In fact, that was a shift from the time 2 years before. But all of us were very conscious in using that very minimally. Just to report home that one was still alive. But that immersion in such a place where there is essentially nothing to do is very powerful, because of course there's stuff to do, but it's just about being kind of present in that moment to allow what needs to happen to begin to happen.
Yeah. No, just that itself without the medicine, if you did that for 2 weeks, you'll have plenty of lessons.
Absolutely. And I think that's a massive component of all of this work that we do. It's creating these moments of stop and allowing ourselves to really land and come into that moment that is such a powerful and important part of the whole process.
Yeah. What are some of the key learnings? I don't want to spend too much time there because I know you're still integrating everything, but what are some of the key learnings and experiences you can talk about that really stand out?
Yeah, I'm not ready to talk a lot about it yet because it's just still so fresh. Yeah. But for me, I think one of the primary things that was happening in that I alluded to at the earlier point when we were talking about this I don't want to call it fight, it sounds too negative, but this dialogue between the head and the heart, it really led to me in fact, it did lead into a battle. There was a raging battle going on between my mind and my deeper present self, shall we say, which turned into quite some difficult ceremonies where there was, challenging to say the least, shall we say. And I suffered, but through that suffering, I arrived at a point of such stillness and such peace, which is still very much with me, and I hope will stay with me for very long. And it's the challenge that now is set, having come back to maintain the practices to maintain that stillness. And but that for me was one of the biggest gifts from this, and one of the things that I'm not surprised happened, as it also forms quite an integral part of the work that I do in service in helping people to get to that point of stillness, of presence, of peace. So when I was in consultation with some of the people that were guiding me over there, when I was pulling my hair out with frustration, going, what's going on here? Why are there 10 voices talking to me in my head at the moment? Will they go away? Excuse me. The point then was, maybe you're having to go through this to feel exactly what it's like, and then feel exactly what it's like to be back in that place of stillness afterwards. So that for me is maybe one of the biggest gifts that's come from that, along with so much. This was 2 weeks. It was a colossal amount of learning, of growing, of experiencing, that it's just, we could be here for hours. So.
Do you feel like re-energized and healthier after this 2 weeks retreat? I mean, I can feel that from your presence and from having talked before, but I'd love to kind of get how you feel coming back now.
No, that's a really good one. Thank you, because that for me also was one of the primary reasons for going, and also one of the very notable things that's occurred as a result of this experience, in that I have had in the past year, for example, quite a period of ill health. And I was really noticing this manifesting in my body and feeling very stuck and very stiff and very kind of like, this doesn't feel like me. It's been quite tough. And this was an immense 2 weeks of healing. So forget all of the other downloads that I had and all of the other wisdom that you gain and all of the things that you've seen and the memories that you recurred and all these things, just on a personal healing level. I feel like I've been flushed out from the inside, from the darkest corners, from the grubby little bits that were underneath underneath my skin or in my bones. They've been recognized, treated, healed, and that with that comes a spaciousness which is really quite profound and beautiful. I notice it in the way I move, in the way I heal myself, in the way I talk. So again, this is one of the beautiful elements that can come through doing this is just on that very physical, emotional, spiritual level, this cleansing that can take place through doing this sort of work.
Yeah, it's wonderful. And I can definitely notice it. I mean, we've talked over the last year and a half, 2 years, at different points. And I gotta say, like, seeing you today, I was like, wow, like there's just a different presence. It's like stronger, leaner, more assured, just stronger. Like it's like a beautiful tree. I don't know, like I can't, like a tree is like the first image that came to my mind, but when you look at a healthy tree and you're like, wow. So
thank you. It's nice to hear that. So
now let's look at your personal journey, your journey going from your corporate life in London, even before. I mean, I'd be interested in your boarding school days, because I went through boarding school in France, all boys boarding school, and it was quite an experience. So I'm curious, like, starting there, what are even some of the lessons and experiences you had there? It was in England, I'm assuming, next to London. Was it like an old boarding school, or?
Yes. It was an old traditional boarding school going through the period I was there, thankfully, a process of modernization. So it was trying to throw off the shackles of Victorian conformity and move a little bit into the modern age.
Lucky you.
But still within the confines of, the British private school system. So there is, an inherent conservatism which will remain for some time yet, I feel. My goodness. I still find this a topic that's quite hard to talk about. And that's okay. That's perfectly okay. And it's something that comes back to me more and more as I do this work, the effect of that, both the positive and the negative. So, of course, there's the positive of being given access to an exemplary form of education. That's, sometimes when I look back at some of the situations that I was in, it's kind of unbelievable the level of privilege that was offered through going through that system. And the sacrifice that my parents made, for example, to enable this to happen, and it was something I did from a very young age. I essentially flew the nest as a 13-year-old boy, which I'm still trying to fathom, quite honestly. But I also feel, and I can see that there's some negativity that comes with that, but also a large degree of positivity that I was this independent, well, it's ironic in a sense. I was this kind of independent, free-spirited young thing from, I think, as soon as I can remember. And maybe this was part of my journey to forge my own path at a somewhat younger age than most people do. And I feel that it was fundamental in setting me up to be strong enough to follow the paths that I have followed in this life and continue to, which are often the untrodden ones. But at the same time, you then jump into a system, and that system is relatively kind of rigid. And if you don't fit that box of what you're meant to be, it can be quite a challenge. And then there's obviously the challenge of being in a boarding system, which I'm not going to go into in much detail, but it's tough.
Oh yeah.
You have to be tough from an age when you shouldn't have to be tough.
Yeah.
That's maybe what I'll say on that.
I agreed. I can relate. Then the positive and the negative as well. And I was in boarding school about the same age you were, from actually 12 to 15. And so, it's challenging for a
Yeah.
child who's developing through that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it, as you said, it gives you independence, self-reliance.
Yeah.
I think is another thing. But I'm just curious. I see it less and less nowadays. I hear about the term boarding school less and less. I don't know if it was something that happened more often in the old days. But I'm always curious about other people that went through that. Have had very similar experiences. I don't know. They all look for the positive, but they're like, yeah, there's definitely some challenges. And if I ask them, would you put your kids through boarding school? I mean, I wouldn't put my kids through boarding school.
No, I wouldn't either.
I mean, it would break my heart.
Yeah.
But so then you went through corporate life. I'm just going to skip over between boarding school, skip a few years here. And, how was corporate life, talking from, one box to another box?
Yeah.
How did that go?
It was tough. I jumped into the life of corporate sales as a young man coming out of university, and it was not necessarily a conscious choice. It was more having left university and thinking, I just want a job and live in London.
Yeah.
And I was blessed to be at that time when would that been, the kind of late 90s, where jobs were 2 a penny, a bit of a different market than things are now. And you could just kind of rock up one day and find a job the next day, and there you were. So there wasn't much kind of, let's say at that point, consciousness behind any of those decisions. It was more, let's see where this goes. And I was a tough little cookie, and I found out I could sell. So I jumped into this very turbulent and cutthroat, macho environment, and moved from kind of job to job in that, and was doing quite well. The thing was, at the back of my mind, I knew this had a shelf life. This was not, this wasn't one of those jobs you got up in the morning and kind of went, yay. It was very much done at that time for the let's say the money that was coming into the bank account. But it was still there. There was always a level of consciousness behind that as well, that this will end. I will leave this at some point. I don't know what to do, but the time will come. So let's just save for that time. Let's just use this for what it is. And don't get me wrong, there were some very good times with that. I was living in London as a young person. It was fun. But there was going to be a time when that was going to end, and especially when you're kind of progressing in a career and then you realize you don't particularly like it, you get to a level where it's make or break, and either you're going to go in for the next level and go up to that real senior space, and I feel when you do that, you have to be fully committed to it, and it has to, for me, it has to be something that comes from within, and it purely wasn't. So that and other personal circumstances got me to a stage where it was done. And that was a process as well of my own personal development happening at the same time, having what I would consider maybe to be one of my first burnouts of the few that I've had in life. My first dip into having therapy, and then through that process, understanding myself more and what was going on, and coming to the decision that this show's over. It's time to do something radical. And that.
Sorry. No, keep going. I want to.
No, but so that radical step involved just this big process of quit. Let's quit this. I'm done. Let's quit where I'm living, because I was also done there.
Yeah.
And a very arrogant and maybe, let's say, naive thought or wished that I was going to run away into the sunset and everything was going to be perfect. Which, as we all know, isn't quite how things pan out. Because you may run, but that bag of tricks comes along, very much tied to your leg.
Oh, yeah. So where was that sunset you ran to? Was it when you went to South America?
Yeah, I went to Central America. That ended up being for a couple of years. I had been thinking, right, it was time to go and do something different. Maybe I'll go and do some volunteer work or something like that. And initially, I started looking at options over the African continent, because generally in the UK, when you consider that work, there's this automatic link with our relationship with the African continent.
Yeah.
But I also happened to have been starting to learn Spanish at that time as well, through general interest. And a friend of mine said, "Why aren't you looking at Latin America?" And it was a place that had never even been on my radar until that point. I was like, "Oh yeah, that's a good idea. Let's look at that." So I started looking at options in Latin America, and I was very drawn to Nicaragua. And this again kind of goes back to that point you were mentioning earlier on about the draw to go to Colombia earlier on this year. I read an article about Nicaragua and it just lit something up in me. It's like, that's it. I have to go there. So I searched some options. I actually ended up originally in Costa Rica. So got on a plane and got to Costa Rica, naively expecting it to be this kind of it's a palm tree and a sunset in my head, which it actually very much wasn't where I ended up.
Wrong sunset.
Wrong sunset, no palm tree. And very quickly realized that wasn't the place where I wanted to be. And then again, did another mini quit and embarked on, a trip. I hadn't gone there to be a backpacker. I hadn't gone there to travel. I'd gone there to work, but I realized that was part of the need to have the confidence to jump, to leave a very secure job, a very well-paid job, a home. I needed a security, maybe this kind of buffer to have got me there. But once I got there, this whole world opened up in front of me, and this desire to explore. So I sent everything home that I brought with me that I didn't need and packed a light bag, and off I went. And the first stop was going to Nicaragua, which was what I was hoping for, but still not finding a thing to keep me in one spot for a long time. So for a year, I moved around the continent of Central America and Mexico, generally trying to stay good chunks of time in places. So really learning the language, doing some short-term volunteering here and there, going and living in villages as the only gringo. It was really deep and profound. So it was, of course, there was an element of hanging out with other backpackers, but for me, it was way more deep than that. It was a real journey, and utterly transformational.
And that's without medicine, right?
Absolutely. And this is the kind of the ironic thing. I spent years traveling and living and working over the continent of Latin America, which obviously throughout has this deep tradition of using these ancestral medicines, and they didn't come anywhere on my path at all at that time. I was having to do the work another way.
Foundational.
And it really was. There was really elements of going through this kind of whole dark night process, and this whole process of the hero's journey, going on this big trip, not knowing where you're going, facing all these tasks, and then coming back. And it was utterly transformational, and was really the foundation to what I consider one of the primary foundations to everything that's come since. Had I not done that, I wouldn't be here living the way I'm living, loving the way I'm loving, doing the things I'm doing, working the way I'm doing. It was utterly transformational. I'm so grateful for that.
What is like, this is a hard one, but what is like one insights that, where I'm assuming as you were going through that, like you said, that you were shifting how you were looking at the world, how you were looking at yourself, how you were looking at living life. And what are some of those big shifts, those big moments where you're like, oh wow, whether it's like the rhythm of life or how people live or who humans are?
Yeah, I think three things come to mind. I think to share an experience that happened relatively early on when I was kind of on the road and absolutely lost. I had no idea. Well, physically lost. I didn't know where I was, but more on a existential level.
Yeah.
It's like, what the hell am I doing? And this whole, essentially now the term we would call it maybe in this space is kind of ego death. In the sense that I had been this person. I had been this important senior person with a suit and respect and a team and this and that and that and that. And then all of a sudden I'm in the back of the truck with the backpack and I haven't shaved and I just look like anybody else. And of course I was anybody else because we're all everybody else.
Yeah.
So there was this real cutting down of taking you back to the real basics and really stripping away all of these layers that we build and really stripping you back to your naked core for you then to start to think what comes or feel what comes next. So I'd say that was one. You mentioned this rhythm of life, which I think is really vital. This wasn't also the first time I've done this. I did this also, the trip like this when I was 18. So that was also that going back to one of the beauties of the independence that I got from school. I was very adamant that as soon as I left school, I was going to go off and travel the world, which I did on my own at 18.
No.
And that comes back to me a lot when I'm in ceremony as well, of this kind of young lad just in the forest hitchhiking in Canada. And I really, at that point, had been on the road for 6 or 7 months, was just living by the day, telling the time by the sun, boiling my water on my fire every day that I made. And so that's always stuck with me, as it did on this trip as well. So everything slows down. You're very much in the moment, a huge amount of time, solitary time. I've generally been quite a solitary beast my whole life and very comfortable and happy with that. But when you get to that level of, there's so much time for contemplation. There's so much time for really feeling and understanding what's going on. So that was enormous. And that was one of the biggest shocks coming back. I still remember going to London the first time, having come back from those trips, and it was kind of, this is what they were right. This was the Matrix, It's just like, I understand, It was a shock, but of course you do come back, and you then have to find your own rhythm in that system. And there was one more that I wanted to say, but it's now just left me. So if it comes back, I'll bring us back there.
So you came back from your journey in South America back to London, a new man, transformed in many ways through those experiences. What's next?
Yeah, well, thank you, because that was one of the points that I wanted to touch on that I had a memory lack from. I think for me, it was also a journey, this South American one, of real social awareness. Like it was such an opening of eyes and perspective and recognition of what's going on around the world. So from a kind of a social justice perspective, shall we say. So that was really one of the kind of radical transformations is this kind of energizing of this drive to help in the making good process, should we say. I don't really like the sound of that. It sounds terribly colonial, but it's just that's that drive to be part of something which is way bigger than just me and us here. You become part of a global community and you see the injustice which was there. So on a professional level, it led me into then transforming kind of out of what had been this corporate work into the social justice and non-profit world. Yeah. So there began the next phase of working on kind of systemic and community level social justice projects all over the world, across sub-Saharan Africa, North Africa, the Middle East, the Pacific, South America.
Do you have an example of one of those projects?
Yeah, so I worked as part of a global coalition of NGOs that were, for example, trying to eliminate a group of diseases called neglected tropical diseases. So I headed up projects on a particular blinding eye disease called trachoma. So working with ministries of health around the world in countries that trachoma was a public health problem as part of their elimination strategies. So that's one example. My last role here, and I was working in the Netherlands, was working for an NGO which worked in the realm of human rights, particularly focused on sexual and reproductive health and youth participation and good governance, with a specific focus on using digital media as a means for information sharing and participation. And they're kind of at the bigger end, and then right through down to real kind of grassroots, small, heart-led NGOs, a disability shelter for young children in the Andes, probably very close, in fact, to where you run your retreats in. That was in Urubamba.
There's
Valley.
There's one for children called the Children of. Maybe actually we might even know the place. I don't know. Like we did some work with them because the retreat center we work with also donate to the children shelter that they have in Peru, because there's a lot of children by themselves. They need a place to stay.
So, all sorts of different projects, but mainly focused around the area kind of education, public health, human rights. And again, from these kind of tiny little on a shoestring grassroots organizations through to multilateral big boys.
Oh, that's wonderful. Are you still involved with those projects?
Yeah, less and less, but as a consultant, yes, I still do just kind of consulting work now and then with those. But I have found over the years that's tailed off as I've spent more of my time focusing on the work that we'll come to, I think, in a moment.
Yes.
But it was also interesting, actually, in this last week. One of the kind of messages that came through was, okay, you've had this period away from focusing on that and more focusing on this healing, growth, and let's say partly involved in medicine work. How do you incorporate the learnings from that and this work that you're doing back into a sector like that to try and again bring maybe more of the heart into that work than which is what is so much driven by the head. So I don't know where that's going at the moment, but that's one of the things to start looking into as to how. I don't believe in just siloing oneself and just saying I am this and I do that. I feel that it's very beneficial to see where the meet points between these different worlds are and how they can coexist.
Yeah, well, especially for you, since you have all those different facets of yourself, all those different parts. I mean, all those different experiences. It's like bringing it all together.
Yeah,
I love that. I mean, I'm on a similar journey right now. It's like, how do you
yeah,
harmonize all those parts?
exactly. Yeah.
Because they're,
And let's,
they're important.
yeah, and let's step up. And that was one of the messages when going back to that question, you said, what were some of the messages? One of the messages for me was very much, right, come on, own these 50 years of life experience you've got. You've got a lot, you've done a lot, and a lot of very interesting stuff. How can you blend that, harvest
Yeah,
that, and really own it and kind of step forward and do more with it?
it's beautiful.
It's been a period very much of kind of quite humble stillness in developing this work that I've been doing, but it's very much, okay, come on,
Yeah.
you can do it, step up.
Yeah, this is nice because another theme you talked about, when we chatted before, was that maybe in the form you sent, is the theme of death and rebirth. And
Hmm.
when you contrast that with harmonizing the different parts, it's interesting because I think there's a tendency, which is maybe the initial tendency in our journeys of thinking about death and rebirth. And then we died, we're like, hey, no, we're good. This part is behind us, and we put it behind us. But at the same time, I think there's a flip side to that, which is like, okay, we've moved forward through a death and rebirth, but we still have all that previous experience, those previous lives, and they're not, if you demonize them and if you distance yourself from them, you're also creating some other type of dissonance within yourself. And I feel like it's the next level of like, okay, yes, we die and we have rebirth, but at the same time, it's important, just like our ancestor, it's important to acknowledge what's come before. And it has gifts. People talk about generational trauma, but there's also generational gifts that
Absolutely.
come from the past. So it's beautiful to hear that, and you going through
and
that
you,
journey.
as you say, learn to. Some bits do need to wither and die, but as you say, they don't disappear. And it's maybe death and dying is just too extreme. Maybe it's just a reforming of.
Yeah.
So things can just slightly reform and re-emerge in a different way than they previously had been.
Maybe it's more like the caterpillar and the butterfly. That's another
Yeah,
guest gave that. It's like, hey,
yeah,
the caterpillar actually liquefies in the cocoon and then reforms into a butterfly. And I was like, yuck. But, at the same time, it doesn't really die, but it still goes into that liquefaction, if that's a word.
Well, yeah, let's call it metamorphosis.
That's a great.
That's what it is. So let's say rather than death and rebirth, let's just call it, metamorphosizing, because that's exactly what it is. And I think that also just goes back. Sorry, just to one more thing. That's kind of the fourth point that came through that kind of transformational journey was this. Yeah, in a sense, that metamorphosizing, that it enabled me through these years of being over there. I had, essentially, I think through having to have been so tough and from the environments that I had lived in and worked in, become very much run and oriented from this. And this from the neck down was an automon, not really feeling, absolutely not in contact with its authentic self. And this was the beginning of that kind of opening up the cracks to allow that, essentially feeling, emotion, whatever, to start to surface. So you do start to become more who you are, but had the armor around it to stop it happening. So that was the beginning, and that's still, that never stops.
It's always in the making. That's such an inspiration. I hope people who listen, who maybe are going through that and are disconnected from their body and feelings, realize they're not alone. There's a lot of people going through that. and it can be a journey and a process to get through to the other side, to reconnecting. But you're not alone. Other people are going through that, and it is a journey. But that takes so. Now let's segue into your encounter with the medicine and how that changed your life. I'm assuming that hadn't happened yet, or
No,
it was about to happen.
no, it came quite late in my life, which I'm actually very grateful for. I'm very grateful to have done all of the work that I did before that happened. So when it happened, I arrived in such a good space, that it was just like, okay, here I am. What's going to happen? And it was really as simple as that. There was no deep intention. There was no very needing problem to be solved or issue to dive in with. It was more, I'm here, from sitting in humbleness and waiting to see what might happen. And it happened.
It happened. What can you share of when it happened? If you want to share.
Oh God, yeah. No, I am very blessed to have been one of those people that truly had a mystic experience on their first encounter with this. And again, it's interesting for me, that term mystic experience wasn't necessarily something that I had the language for when it happened. And it is a term which I use very sparingly, because it is a bit of a buzzword at the moment. Everybody's shopping for a mystic experience. And so let's use that term respectfully, because it was, quite frankly. And also, one of the beauties of this was I went in fully unprepared and essentially naive to the experience. So I knew nothing. I had read nothing. I had watched nothing.
Was it with ayahuasca?
Yeah, this was. Yeah. And all I had as my reference was a friend who's been a dear friend and someone that's been very instrumental for me getting on this path, way even before kind of medicine work. But I had watched her journey with it with intrigue, and just knew that at some point, I would probably do that, but I didn't know when, I didn't know why. It was just, again, this kind of pioneer in me that, sometimes it's just something that presents itself that features somewhere on your path. And then the moment arose just to okay, here we go. But had read nothing, had seen nothing, had taught nothing. So I had no idea what to expect. So in that sense, with that beauty of naivety, I could just kind of lay back and surrender to what's going on. And essentially, that's one of the battles I have now when I do this work, and that's one of the battles I had last week. Was, oh hell, I really wish I could have that again, because it was just so joyous, and not joyous isn't the right word. It was just new and fresh and untainted. Whereas now,
like the first Lord of the Rings.
So now you come with all of the previous experience you've had, and especially if you're working in the area as well, you have this kind of this duality of, am I doing this for me or am I doing it for everybody else? And obviously they meet in the middle. But yes, beautiful. I feel very, very honoured and very blessed to have had that experience. And it came also just the right. It wasn't just an unconscious choice to do it then. It did also come at a very significant point, because as well, I was recognizing that I was coming to the end of the the life cycle of where I was at that point, kind of professionally and personally. And I'd also been going through a period of reflection and some coaching, and this thing had started to emerge in me. Again, it was literally like a voice saying, yeah, you're ready to move into service at some level and work more now on the individual level. I didn't know what that really meant, but I just knew but I did, in a sense, but it didn't necessarily have a topic. So therefore, this also came at a good time, and it kind of, pow, so okay. And of course, it wasn't one of those things, okay, I'm quitting my job the day after and everything is going to be this, not at all. But it was just a very good kind of coming together of energies.
Yeah. That's important, I think, because you'd also done a lot of work, personal growth work before that, as you're calling out. I'm assuming you had tools, like meditation and other tools, yoga. I don't know, like, did you have other tools at your disposition then, like to help you?
I think up until that stage, I had been a very off and on practitioner of those sorts of practices. So that's off and on, I would say, but not on a religious level, shall we say? Not on a level that that it did have that level of kind of daily impact on my life. I would say that over the years, there definitely has been a very spiritual component to my life, but again, I didn't really know what to call it. So it's only been with retrospect that I see this thread that's kind of gone through from childhood until now, of this deeply spiritual component to my life and to me. But because it didn't necessarily conform to any particular faith or teaching, even that trip, it was deeply spiritual, but I didn't know to call it that. I just knew it was really freaking important and some really deep stuff happened, but it totally was. So that was there all along, but it's taken more recent understanding of that to kind of join the dots and really understand the significance of all of that. More contemplative and more, let's say, personal spirituality, that I call it, hence that when it goes right back to the beginning of where you mentioned this whole thing about the mystic in the making kind of thing, that is the essential essence of mysticism, isn't it? Developing your own personal and relationship with that's bigger than us.
That's the beautiful way to put it. I think that spiritual aspect, there's a big part about that personal journey, and I'd like to contrast that to religion, where it doesn't feel as personal, though it should be. But I think there's a big part in spirituality where it's like you taking your journey of growth and that self-agency and knowing the power within and the range and the spectrum of who you are, can be, and how we're connected to everything. So I want to move from this experience where you talked about feeling the call of being of service and ending one aspect of one phase of your life to MAGUEY, and how did you connect those dots?
By seriously taking some time off. So, and again, you just said the word there, ending one and moving to the other, and it's very much not. I think I see this as a continuance. So from this, if we go back to that early trip, that was the beginning of this kind of opening up, and of widening one's sphere, of being able to connect more at kind of this level. And when you move from corporate to the NGO world to the social justice world, of course you're operating in a completely different kind of realm of behavior and of what's the word, of values, and that's how your values changing, etc., etc. And that led on to then this. So it definitely is a continuance. And what happened was just taking some. It's like, right, I'm done. Let's just stop. And let's just really take a leap into the unknown. And it really was a total leap of faith, with no plan, no set idea of where it was going to go, apart from the interests that I had. So I remember the early days, doing some kind of mapping of what, if I was going to do this, what are the areas that might be there. And it's very interesting. I found that sheet just the other day, actually. I looked at it and like, oh, yeah, that's kind of happening. And some of them more than others, but there's obviously a linkage between all of that.
It's like a vision board?
Yeah, more or less. Yeah. With a mind map, a vision board, drawing all these things of what are the areas of practice that interest me, what do I feel into. And one of those, this was sometime after that last story we talked about, was the potential of working with psychedelics and plant medicines and that realm. But again, it wasn't a forced decision, like, this is what I'm going to do and this is what's going to kind of come out from that. It was time, the time was needed, and then it just kind of started organically. Some people came to me who had shared my journey, or how I had shared my journey with, the whole journey, and were curious and asked to be guided. It was just kind of as simple as that. And then I just heard myself saying yes. And then, having said yes, thinking, oh,
yes,
there's a degree of responsibility that comes with that. So what actually is this, and what's it going to be, and where's it going to go? And that was the kind of the crystallization and the formation of should we call it, the first phase of what this is and will continue to be.
How many years ago was that?
3. It kind of started, yes, I was in this early stages about 3 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now we fast forward to MAGUEY and the coaching work and guiding work and facilitating work that you're doing. One of the terms you used to describe that work was, helping people have a fully integrated life. But the extension of that is, as you said, help people have a more conscious and authentic connection to themselves and the world. And I love the fact that you added the world and you didn't make it just about themselves. Can you talk about those kind of, I don't know if they're separate aspects, I think they're all kind of blended together, but can you talk about those aspects of your work and maybe some examples of how you help people?
Yeah, I also could take it a bit further, and I kind of talk about the 3 S's of kind of self-surrounding and spirit. And the spirit one could maybe be in brackets because some people aren't necessarily ready for that or interested in that. But so in terms of self, it's supporting people to connect on that level of kind of authentic relationship, that ability to become still, to listen, to hear, along that guidance of knowing that that wisdom is within all of us. It's just sometimes the noise around it is blotting it out and we're unable to hear it. So that is kind of the premise behind that deepening relationship with self. And and there's multiple means of doing that. And I am very much a believer that from that, as they say, when we do heal and we do develop this relationship with ourselves, and when we are operating at this authentic version of ourselves, that ripples out. We start with ourselves, and the effect that can have on those that are even quite far away from us can be quite profound. The effect that it can have on your partner, the effect it can have on your family, on your colleagues. If you're a person who is in a position of, let's say, leadership or authority, if you are coming into that role more healed, more whole, more empathic, more authentic, the effects that you have around you can be magnificent. But we aren't just ourselves. We are products of the environment in which we have grown up and continue to live. And that's an integral part of, again, us kind of living as systemic beings. Let's say we aren't just one element. We are systemic beings, that we are our intellect, we are our bodies, we are our hearts, we are part of an environment, part of a community, hopefully. So it's also looking at these elements of what makes us thrive, both what they give us and also what we give back. What we give back to them. And then for those that are ready, obviously, then deepening that personal relationship with that which is maybe bigger than both us and the environment that's around us. But that comes for those that are wanting to do that, have a feeling towards that. And so that comes very much at the invite of whoever I'm working with. But again, it kind of leads into that whole question of what is spirituality. And for many people, they hear this word and it kind of instantly puts up a barrier. But as I'm adding into when you talk about that realm, you can sit on a stone and look at a frog, and that can be spiritual. You don't have to be on your knees in a church.
Yeah. You can learn a lot from the frog, or just a
random example, but
just a blade of grass, or
exactly.
Can be very simple.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, I can understand. Though the medicine does help too. If you're looking at the frog with a little medicine, that will even deepen that experience. I mean, I stared at a blade of grass with some medicine for 6 hours as the sun was setting, and I had so many epiphanies, and I probably could have done it without if I was way more experienced in my meditation practice and all that, and really derived a lot of lessons. But the medicine does help. A little bit.
No, I'm glad you brought that example up, because I think for me, the medicine is very important, whichever medicine we are talking about, but it does fit into that wider container, let's say, of conscious practice. And as you just alluded to, you can also do this without, if you have the practice or the ability to do it. And it was something I did last year, for example. I did my first nature solo that was 24 hours alone under a tree with nothing. So, a mat to sleep on and a blanket to lay under, and a bottle of water. But no book, no food, no nothing.
Yeah.
And for me, it was absolutely fantastic to witness the process that you go through in that, and then stepping out of that, going back into the real world 24 hours later, you suddenly realize what an altered state you have gone into, and that's just by simply being present with a tree.
Yeah.
And what's around, and the few elements that are around that. But what the medicines can often do is it just creates that, again, that more detailed moment of stop, and that container to kind of go maybe even more.
I think experiencing it without is really important, and going through that experience without. I'm curious, when your clients, if that's the proper term that you like to use, if your clients come to you, are there a lot of them that you start without using any, I'm assuming you're using truffles in the Netherlands, so without using magic truffle, like, are there exercises you give them to kind of prepare them for those experiences that actually help them without even using the magic truffles?
Yeah, absolutely. No, most people at this stage in the kind of the evolution of this practice have the psychedelic component was a core component of that, and it's a core kind of draw, let's say, for the people that are wanting to do this. But I very much believe it is part of a wider and longer process. So essentially, there's this kind of arc, let's say, of it's the preparation. There's these three key stages of these programs that I run, which are deep preparation, then obviously in the peak experience, and then the period of integration, which essentially never ends. Our time working together may end, but the process, as you well know, the process of integration is a never-ending one. But that preparation process that I guide people through, coach people through, whatever word we choose, I don't really like either of those, but we have to choose one. Essentially, the idea is when someone arrives here for the day of ceremony, they can already be in an altered state, in a heightened state of consciousness than they would ordinarily be through having done kind of simple preparation in the weeks beforehand. So whether that's bringing more mindfulness into your life, whether it's trying to be more focused on doing some meditation, maybe doing some fasting. And by fasting, I don't mean not eating, but more just being conscious about what one's eating and denying oneself something for a period of time. Because through that denial, when you go for your morning cup of coffee, that you regularly do the first thing you wake up, you're like, oh, hell, I can't have that today. And it instantly brings you back into that moment and why you're doing this. Using more active time, or not active time in nature, but maybe more passive time in nature. And so the idea really is to find these moments of stop, which I often refer to slow down, to becoming more aware. And that's why I always describe this as this is a whole consciousness practice. And all of those things that you do as part of that preparation phase are tools and practices and levels of awareness that can hopefully can stay with you way beyond the experience of ceremony. They're practical things. Understanding how you breathe, using your breath to regulate. They're all small but important things that we can continue to do in ordinary waking life.
It's like I'm getting all teary because I'm like, they're like small important things that we've forgotten to do, that we connect back with as part of that preparation. And then I think during the medicine journey, then it hits us. It's like, oh wow, breath is really important.
Yeah. Wow. Look what I can do. Look what it can do. Yeah. Just that beauty of stopping and just breathing. And then we're not talking about breath work here. We're just talking about becoming aware of one's breath.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It can be so profound, listening to the noise our body makes as we take a gentle breath in and out.
Oh yeah.
Feeling, just trying to feel in. For example, I always guide people to feel into the inside of your nose as this breath is going in and going out. And then you start to become that, that hair that's just kind of moving in the breeze. And then
it's funny how in sync we are. But that was an experience I had in an ayahuasca ceremony way back. One of the first one is feeling the hair on my nose as the breath was going in and out. And then lately, what I try to teach people to do is actually visualize where the energy of the breath travels as it's traveling through your body, which is pretty amazing because you can actually feel it, going down the throat, filling the lungs, expanding, and then, going back out. And the breath is like such a beautiful tool.
Look what you've done to yourself just by doing that one exercise.
Well, it also transported me back to lots of places. This wonderful. So in the last 3 years, I'm sure you've seen amazing transformations. Can you talk about some of the things that really stand out, and how that's changed your perspective of things personally, like being of service?
Yeah, and an example that's coming straight to mind, and it's actually very interesting. It was in a session with someone, which actually it was a preparatory session for we weren't even sure at that stage whether they were going to go on to even doing any medicine work. We were just doing more classical. Well, no, they weren't classical, but they were more, coaching sessions, let's say. And something was starting to happen it's very hard to explain. Something was just starting to happen in this person, which was beyond their comprehension. As in, they were starting to feel and connect on a level with themselves that they have never ever experienced before. And I can still remember kind of a bit like the look of terror in their eyes, looking at me for what's the word? Not assistance, but more just to confirm that they were okay, because this thing was happening, and I could sense that it was happening. And obviously I was there just to go, it's okay. Just let this unfold. And just seeing this person just essentially meet themselves for the first time, their real self, was so profound. It still kind of gives me goosebumps now to think about it. It was such an honor to witness this eruption, let's say, of connection, and that really was the beginning of a real kind of journey of transformation for this person. So it was very lovely to see. In terms of, if we were specifically talking about psychedelic work and medicine work, I think one of the things that continues to fascinate me is just the variety of experience that you witness. Both before, during, and after, obviously, experiences. It's fascinating for me to watch how obviously there is a let's say a program that we follow, but that is a framework, and everybody will interpret it different, and there is all the flexibility in that to go where it needs to go. But you can provide you provide everybody the same introduction, the same materials, the same kind of framework. This is the same, but how they choose to work with it, how they interpret it, where the resistance comes up. And then some people that dive in and work and work and work and work, and some people are like, nah, what work, and that I find always really interesting. And then obviously the ceremony itself, as you'll be very well aware, and it's the same personally as well, that you never know what's going to actually happen. And you can have, the same setting, the same medicine, the same dose, the same this, the same that, and the range of experience is vast. And that's what is, for me, again, one of the beautiful elements of this, and also obviously one of the most challenging in maintaining that level of self-belief when you're sitting with this, is that what you have to do that is about just sitting in pure presence in front of someone, so you can just intuitively be led and guided as to what and how to serve them, because you can only pre-prepare as much as possible. And of course we have our ethical frameworks and our guidelines and our training, but still we never know exactly what's gonna come up.
Yeah.
And that's beautiful.
Yeah.
But I think for me, again, you see this. Some of the most, when you have these most difficult ones, when people also leave a little bit unsure about exactly what happened was what they were expecting or what they wanted, whether they say disappointment. But then again, when you get to that next phase, in that integration phase, where things start to land and the lessons continue to come, because as you know, it's not just coming in that when we're at the peak of the curve. The downloads are happening there, and maybe the peak experiences are happening there, but the lessons continue to unfold and unfold and unfold if you're willing to if you're able to listen to them and find the time still to connect with them.
Absolutely. Yeah, I almost feel that integration period is that second mountain you have to climb. And it's tricky because a lot of people don't realize that, because the psychedelic experience itself is such a high peak, and so they feel a lot of time that they've arrived, they've had that experience. But I'm like, no, there's a whole other mountain you have to climb now. And it doesn't involve substance. It doesn't, it involves you facing and integrating and working with your community, with yourself. And that's a whole other mountain. And in a way, like if you look at something like ayahuasca, it's so intense, especially if people travel far away. It's so special. You feel like you've accomplished your journey. You've went and came back. But no, the other work is just starting. The other mountain you have to climb is just starting. And it really, really hit me in October when we ran the retreat, and we were supporting people in integration afterward. And I was like, yeah, that's that mountain to climb.
Yeah. And that mountain is large.
Oh yeah. yes. I think it's a lot larger than the ayahuasca mountain.
Yeah. No. And yeah, it is. You're touching on such an important point, because there can be this tendency, especially let's say a consumerist society, it's kind of like, right, I've done my thing, I've had my
Yeah.
experience, and then let's move on to the next. And it's like, yeah, it will keep giving if you stay connected to it.
Yeah.
But it does take extreme commitment to do that. And I'm not saying I'm holier than thou. I've done plenty of this work as well, and have failed in my integration. You go to a retreat one
Oh,
weekend and you're back at work the week after, and you're like, what retreat? And but it's again amazing where that can pop up again in the future. And for example, that's what happened with me on this recent way. I was at a holotropic retreat earlier on in the year, which was quite mind blowing, and I did very poorly with my integration, but it came back to say hello during this. And it's like, oh yeah, okay, it's like a continuance of
yeah, it tends to do that. And I love how you bring the human aspect to the facilitators and the guides, and that there's also this tendencies of from people of putting the facilitators and the guides on pedestals, like they're perfect, and and it's actually a bad thing, because if you do that, it also creates some strange power dynamics. But it's important to realize, like, first, that they're doing their work. Like, you want to know that they're doing their work, but they're still doing their work. They're gonna, if you have somebody who comes and is like, no, I'm like, I've done all my work, I can heal you now. That's a red flag. That's a pretty big red flag, at least in my mind. But I love how you bring that. No, like, you're helping people, but you have your own journey too.
Yeah, but I also say to people, this very much is a co-creative process. This is really not someone coming here and being, led by a dog leash through all of the elements that has to happen. This has to come from a spirit of co-creativity. For me, that really comes at the very early stages in forming that bond, that bond of trust that comes, especially because in this sense, I don't know if this, I work one-on-one generally with people. So it's not in a group format or in a retreat format. It's very one-on-one. So it's quite intense, but you're creating that bond of trust, and therefore that bond of co-creativity can come from it. And it's through that, this term guide, I think I prefer a bit more maybe the term facilitator, because you're facilitating their ability to do what they can do, and really enabling them to do what they are capable of, willing to do, can do. And
good. Like, we're coming at time here, and I have a couple more questions. One, I don't know if we touched on that, but like, you've been of service following your calling. Well, you've been of service for a long time, I think. But like, the last 3 years working as MAGUEY, at the practice you created, how have you felt like giving, being of service? How has that transformation been for you? Or metamorphosis, or that evolution? Because you give a lot when you do that.
Yeah, beautiful question. Yeah, you do give a lot, and it's a road to really navigate as to how much to give, how to give, what not to give, how much of yourself can you give. And it's been a very big learning journey for me on that, especially for me, kind of doing this from an individual perspective, as in my practice is me, essentially, with some auxiliary help around me when it's needed. So it's been at times quite a lonely path, but it just comes from a place where I know it needs to come from, and that giving, yeah, giving maybe isn't the right term here, but witnessing people go through that through transformation is deeply humbling.
Yeah.
And that is obviously why I feel that partly why we do this, and also then considering we can look at this at different levels, can't we? Obviously, the individuals coming in, but then if we look at it at the collective level as well, if we can build that level of collective healed and collective unity and collective consciousness, it's quite beautiful. But yes, it can come at a cost, and I'm not going to pretend that it hasn't at times been quite difficult. And that takes us full circle to going back to kind of one of the reasons why I wanted to go to Colombia, because I really felt I was kind of struggling on essentially on like an energetic level, as if I was kind of stuck with stuff that maybe wasn't all mine, and just this kind of this. Ugh. And that's what I felt. It was essentially, we talk metaphorically, well, not metaphorically, with ayahuasca about the cleansing that goes on. But I needed to shift a lot of stuff, some of which was mine, some of which maybe wasn't. And that's why these things, like self-care, came through to me as a huge learning. The important for all of us, for all of us, we need to all take our self-care more. Or let's invite ourselves, rather than let's use some nicer language there. Let's take that invitation to us all to integrate self-care into our lives, and you can be very quickly forgotten, and you can be very quickly sucked along on a vortex of whatever. But finding time for self-care is a very strong message for myself, as to how to keep myself balanced.
Yeah. I mean, it's if you're going to help others, you have to be able to help yourself. And, yeah.
You're not helping anybody by being a martyr and burning everything at both ends. You're not.
Right.
Simple.
Yeah. Agreed. Okay. We've talked about MAGUEY, and I love how, I ask everybody the same questions. If you had to capture the essence of leadership, how would you capture it? And your answer was MAGUEY, which I wasn't familiar with the term. And then I did some research, and I was kind of blown away by its many uses. But I'm curious, why did you pick MAGUEY, and answer to that question? And also, why did you pick MAGUEY for your practice?
Over the years, I have just come across this plant all over the world. It's, MAGUEY is the Mexican term. It can be said maguey or MAGUEY, depending where the dots are on the U. It's the agave cactus, but it's not so much the agave cactus which interests me. It's more the flower that comes from it. And for a long time, I've just been drawn to this flower. Flower doesn't really do it justice. It's enormous.
It's really long, right?
4-meter high. Looks like a giant piece of asparagus when it comes out of the cactus, and then it blooms into this fantastic bloom. And for me, that was enough. I was just drawn on a kind of visceral level to this form, this plant, this flower. And I knew that I was attracted to the form. I started to incorporate the form into kind of stylistically into certain things. And then, if you then understand the kind of the symbology behind this flower, in the sense that this cactus, once in its life, sends up this enormous bloom as it's dying. Going back to what we were talking about earlier on, this death, dying, metamorphosis theme. To then shed its seeds, to then begin the new life in that which is around it. So for me, it was really it kind of, when you're asking about how does that link with leadership, it was again about just this supporting people going through their processes of revolution, their processes of metamorphosis, and how we are as leaders really gifted with this opportunity of providing the steerage, let's say, for people who are emerging.
Great. Beautiful. And then I read about all its many uses too.
Yeah. Yeah.
They used it for ancient record keeping, which I didn't know that. Some
paper. Yeah.
ancient texts, sacred texts were written on there. They were used also to create like fences for animals. And I thought their needles were used for also sewing. And then to make ropes.
To make ropes, to make mats, to make construction materials. It's a very multi. And then obviously at the back, at the whole end of it, you've got the alcoholic drink that can come from its heart as well. So so yes, it's a multifaceted plant. But as I say, it was more the
flower.
The flowering and the process of flowering and the symbology behind that. So when I was going to start my practice, it was just like, I'm calling it that, it's not the most easy to pronounce name. It's not the most practical name from marketing perspectives, but I was like, hell, I don't care. This is, I can do what I want.
It's beautiful. I think they have some in Sedona as well. Or they do have some cactus like that, because I remember going to Sedona and obsessing about those and just taking pictures after pictures. It's such a beautiful silhouette, especially, like with a blue sky behind, and you've got this cactus flower coming up. I can totally see the draw here to this beautiful plant. Was there anything else you wanted to talk about, or questions for me, or any other topics you want to touch on?
Yeah, I think if I start that, we'll be here for another hour. And whilst we might enjoy that, I don't know how much more the listeners want to hear of me going on. So no, I think we can leave it there for now.
Well, Nigel, thank you. It was really a pleasure to connect and hear about your journey and your learnings and your metamorphosis. And yes, thank you.
Beautiful, thank you.
Thanks for listening. If you like the show, please subscribe to it on Apple Podcasts, follow me on Instagram at Leadershipedelics, or stop by my website and say hi at fooyad.com. That's Fooyad. There's a lot going on, and I'd love to hear from you all, the listeners that tune in every week. And if you have suggestions for future guests, don't hesitate to reach out. I'm there, and I'd love to get more guests on the show. Thank you. Have a great day.